A Shalom Akim, Shalom, Shalom, giving all praises, glory and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Makakwadash, double honors to the apostles and the elders, great millstone, for teachers of truth and salutations to the sincere Akim and Akwat that may listen. May the blessing of election be upon your house in these times. My name is Raquai, and back in here with another quick Lord's Will, as always, an edifying lesson. And for today's lesson, I wanted to do just a bit more inspiration in regards to a story that I went through and I read through about King David and how essentially the Lord would use family members or people around you to test your integrity, right? And then eventually will still judge them, for depending on what they did to you, right? So a lot of it is essentially a bit of comfort, right? Because, one of the things that, Yahushua even said it himself. He said a prophet was without honor within his own country and his own household, right? So, mocking, scoffing, humiliation, is all part of the all things that the men of the Lord would experience, right? Especially more specifically amongst our own people, right? And I wanted to get an example of this, but I also wanted to get the judgment as well, right? Because we know, pursuant to Romans the 12th chapter, that essentially vengeance is mine, right? So not essentially feeling to crash out, not to refrain, I should say. Refrain is a good word to say. Refrain from crashing out, because those things that those people, whether you abide with them or not, they're not gonna get away scot-free, right? The scriptures say in Ecclesiastes, the Most High require which is past, right? So, it's really to actually as well to instill a bit of hope, for brothers, experience, the affliction, from being around family or anything like that, because a lot of the family members, that you might dwell with, you realize that they're not good people, right? So, you know I wanted to get an example of this. So this is a bit of understanding that the Lord is able to basically kill. There's a sin in the world, kill two birds with one stone. So I wanted to kind of, go through this story here, and I sincerely hope that this lesson is edifying. Right? Let me get this in. Is that Romans? Hold on. This is Romans 15:4 in the Amplified, and it says, "For whatever was written in earlier times was written for our instruction, so that through endurance and the encouragement of the scriptures we might have hope and overflow with confidence in his promises." Right? So, this is to inspire confidence and inspire hope that the Lord is going to instill and give us that recompense, because we're not in a position to be able to do so, right? We're not justified in us, and as I say in the world, like getting your own lick back, so to speak, right? So this is what happened in I'm just going to go through a story with it that happened in King David's life, right? And I sincerely hope that this lesson is edifying. It says, this is 2 Samuel 16, I'll start at verse 5, and I'm reading in the Amplified, and it says, "And when King David came to Beharim, a man named Shimei, the son of Jirah, came out from there, and he was of the family of Saul's household, and he was cursing continually as he came out. He threw stones at David and all the servants of King David, and yet all the people and the warriors remained on the right and on his left," right? So, people are basically, seeing this, you're throwing stones. At this point, King David, he's the king, right? It's kind of like, I think I remember there was a story years ago where this dude was like he was throwing eggs at King Charles, like you know what I mean, like, but you know what I'm saying, like, you know, okay, this is somebody, you know, he's like the top man in Israel, right? At this point, you know, um, this is verse 7. And it says, and this is what Shimei said as he cursed. He said, get out, you man of bloodshed, you worthless and useless man. And the Lord Yahweh returned upon all the bloodshed, I'm sorry, of your house of Saul, in whose place you have reigned. And the Lord Yahweh has given the kingdom into the hands of Absalom, your son. So basically, at this point, Absalom is causing a ruckus, you know, and eventually, you know, he does his wicked act, you know, in basically laying down with his father's concubines, right? So, you know, basically a lot of judgment starts to fall upon, you know, King David, because this is shortly after his transgression in laying with another man's wife, right? So this is basically all the calamity that falls upon his house, right? And it says here, behold, you are caught in your own evil, for you are a man of bloodshed. Then Abishai, David's nephew, the son of Zeruiah, said to the king, why should this dead dog, despicable person, cause my lord the king? I'm sorry, curse my lord the king. So he's like, yo, who are you to talk to, my king, right? Um, Let me go over and take off his head. So this guy, this Abishai dude, man, he's in warrior mode. Like, yo, let me go over and deal with this guy, right? You know what I mean. So the scriptures say, as is the king, so are the officers. So just like how King David is a man of war, you see how his close officers have a similar, I don't want to say a similar mentality, but they have that warlike mentality, right? But this is what David says to kind of like to as really the test of integrity, right? Because a lot of us will experience situations like this, right? This is verse 10. And it says, but the king said, what business is this of yours, O sons of Zeruiah? If Shimei is cursing because the Lord said to him, curse David, then who should say, why have you done so? So, essentially, his mindset was, okay, this is the Lord's bidding. This is the Lord set this up, as an act to be able to curse at me, to keep me, in a humiliated state of mind. So this is basically a test to see, okay, all right, cool, so because really and truly at this point, the easy thing to do is to unsheath the sword and do what you got to do, right? Because that's the easy thing. Because why? Because at that point, David is king. He's king, so he can give out and execute the order, and it can be done, right? But he understood something very, very spiritual, that this was happening because it was the Lord's doing, right? And sometimes, for us as well, sometimes we just get caught up, in the flesh, but remembering that, okay, this is the Lord's doing. Let me refrain from, you know what the flesh feels good and what I want to do, because that's the easy thing to do, is to give into that flesh. And that's something that Paul always touches on. It's like basically walking in the spirit, so you don't really fulfill the deeds of the flesh, right? So David was really, he was really in the spirit, right? At this, in this moment right here. And that's a really tough thing, because you kind of have to subject yourself. You have to kind of keep yourself back, not yeah, keep yourself back, so to speak, right? So um let me continue. As a matter of fact, let me get something that Paul said, actually. That's at First Corinthians 2. And then go to this is First Corinthians 2. This is verse 15. Actually, I'll start at 14. And it says, "But the natural man receiveth not the things of the Spirit of the Most High, for they are foolishness unto him. Neither can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned." So somebody who is natural or carnal, it's difficult to receive those particular things. That person that is actually, when you examine the situation of what's going on, right? So the natural thing to do is what his nephew, Abishai, I think that was his name. Yeah, Abishai wanted to do. So he was thinking very, very natural. He wasn't thinking spiritual. This is how David was thinking. This is verse 15. One sec. And it says, "But he that is spiritual judgeth all things, yet he himself is judged of no man," right? So, David was behaving very, ultimately very, very spiritual in this particular situation, right? Because he understood that this was the Lord's doing, right? So just like, to parallel it into, our own situations, is to be able to sit back and be like, okay, this is happening for the Lord's doing. And a lot of those times it's a test of integrity, especially when you're dealing with people that that know you very well, like family. I just use family as an example, right? Because I believe he was of the household of Benjamin, if I'm not mistaken, right? So Benjamin, that's the same tribe that Saul comes from, right? So, but the point is, it's a lot of us in those situations, you know a lot of us would experience, these kinds of situations, right? So a lot of the times it's a test of integrity, because the easy thing to do is to be able to give in and get your own lick back, so to speak, get your own vengeance, right? So, you know the tough thing is to be able to refrain yourself and actually examine, okay, this is what's going on here. Okay, the Lord is chastising me, or the Lord is building me to become stronger, so I can become more polished, I can be more refined. And it hurts. It hurts sometimes, right? Because of sometimes the person who's actually, doing it, basically, when I say the person doing it, like the vessel I'm talking about, you might have a close relationship with that vessel that's being used to chastise you, but that ultimately it's the Lord's ultimate doing, right? So let me go back here. So this is verse 12 in 2 Samuel 16, and it says, "Perhaps the Lord will look on the wrong done to me by Shimei if he's acting on his own, and in that case, perhaps the Lord will this day return good to me in place of his cursing." So David and his men went down the road, and Shimei went down along the hillside close beside David, and he cursed as he went and threw stones and dust at him, right? So, you know, this is what he was doing. He throwing dust, he's throwing stones, so keep in mind, he's still the king. David, he didn't do anything, right? Even though he has the power to do something, right? So, in your situation, sometimes you might have the power, you know maybe not the authoritative power, but maybe you have the physical prowess to do something, right? But you essentially you take the low. You take, what did Paul say? You basically, what's the opposite of a bound? A base. That's what he said. All right, a base, right? So that's not always. It's a skill. It's a skill to be able to discern that, and to feel what you're feeling, and then to, like, okay, let me let me disregard that and actually move forward and walk in the spirit, right? So this is verse 14, and it says, and the king and all the people who were arrived at him at the Jordan River weary, and he refreshed himself there. So okay, so what I want to do to get to the judgment of this same individual, I'm going to fast forward to First Kings, when David's on his deathbed, right? So just bear with me 1 second. So this is King David's charge to Solomon now, right? So now he's having this conversation with his son, and this is one of the things that he said. Yes, keep, be strong. As a matter of fact, I'll just read it, right? The scriptures say, he that teacheth the son, grieveth the enemy, right? His father, even though his father died, he basically makes a duplicate copy of himself because he's left one like an avenger, like unto himself, right? So this is the blueprint of what he's doing to Solomon, right? As David's about to return back to the spirit world. So this is on some of the things he said. So this is First Kings 2:2, and it says, and I am going the way of all the earth, as the dust. Be strong and prove yourself a man. Keep the charge of the Lord, your power, and fulfill your obligation, and walk in his ways, and keep his statutes and his commandments, his precepts, and his testimonies, as it is written in the law of Moses, so that you may succeed in everything that you do and wheresoever you turn. Right? So he gave basically his son Solomon the understanding. Okay, this is who you show kindness to, but this is who you look out for. So the same person, remember, who was cursing at him, this is what he also said. I'm going to jump down to verse 8, and it says, and look, you have with you the Shimei, the son of Jirah, the Benjamite of Behurim. He is the one who cursed at me with a sinister curse the day I went to Mahanaim. But he came down to meet me at the Jordan on my return, and I swore to him by the Lord Yahweh Bashem Shai, saying, I will not put you to death with the sword. So just like, so King David, he unsheathed, he kept his sword sheathed in the physical sense, but also in the spiritual sense. Like he didn't actually try and, try to get his own vengeance, right? So, he said, this is verse 9, and it says, but now do not let him go unpunished, for you are a wise man, and you will know what to do to him, and you will bring his gray head down to hell. It says Sheol, but it kind of refers to hell, right? We know that hell is not an actual physical place, but that he's going to get basically his punishment. And hell sometimes is also synonymous with the grave, right? So let me see here. Okay, so I'm going to jump down in regards to the judgment that fell upon this character Shimei, right? So this is First Kings 2:36, and it says, now the king sent word and called for Shimei and said to him, build yourself a house in Jerusalem and live there. Do not go from there to any other place. For on the day you leave and cross over the brook Kidron, know the certain that you shall surely die. Your blood shall be upon your own head. And Shimei said to the king, the word ruling is good, as my lord the king has said, so will your servant do. Your servant. So Shimei lived in the Jerusalem for many days, right? So basically, Solomon gave him this order. Okay, you are to live in this house. You stay there. You cross over this brook, which is like a river, or you're gonna die, right? So that's Solomon executing those orders and that judgment, right? But here's where it really gets a little bit more interesting. So this is verse 39, and it says, and it happened after 3 years, two of Shimei's servants ran away to Achish, the son of Maach, and the king of Gath. And Shimei was told, behold, your runaway servants are in Gath. So Shimei saddled his donkey and went to Gath to King Achish to look for his servants. And Shimei went in and brought out them back from Gath. Now Solomon was told that Shimei had gone from Jerusalem to Gath, and he had returned. So the king sent word and called for Shimei and said to him, did I not make you swear by the Lord Yahweh Bashmel Shai, and solemnly warn you, saying, knowing for certain that on the day you leave Jerusalem and go anywhere, you shall surely die? And you said to me, the word ruling I have heard is good. So Solomon's having a conversation with him, right? So it says, why then have you not kept the oath of the Lord and command which I gave you? And the king also said to Shimei, you are aware of your own heart, of all the evil that you did to my father David. Remember what he was doing, right? Throwing stones, mocking, throwing dust at him. He just sat there, King David, he just sat there and he took it, right? He just sat there and he took it, right? So this is what happens. So the Lord shall return your evil upon your own head. Then Solomon shall be blessed on the throne of David and should establish before the Lord forever. Right? So that's pretty much the point. I'll just read this last one here, and it says, so the king commanded Benaiah, the son of Joiada, and he went out and struck down Shimei, and he died. Right, so the kingdom was established in the hands of Solomon. Right, so King Solomon at this point, now he's king, right, and he executed the judgment, for the mocking, the scoffing, right, that he did to King David, right. So all that time, he did not go unpunished, right. He gave them the charge. He was supposed to remain in house arrest in Jerusalem. He ended up going to Gath, right? He didn't stay in Jerusalem, and eventually he broke the oath, and eventually he was struck down and he died, right? So Solomon ended up executing that judgment. But this is all to kind of summarize, I guess a very long-winded point is that that was for King David's end. It was a test, of integrity, at his time, right? To see what he would do in that particular situation, right? And he remained very, very spiritual, right? But at the same time, it shows that, and it's supposed to fill us with joy when the Lord ultimately jacks up our enemies, right? This is part of the hope, right? Let me see if I could find this in Psalms. How does it go? Okay, this is Psalm 7 verse 16 in the NLT. Excuse me. It says, the trouble they make for others backfires on them. It says the violence they plan falls on their own heads, right? So, that recompense eventually, the Lord eventually got that recompense, upon, Shimei, who was mocking, right? So just like, and that also includes a very good mass majority of our people as well, because there's a mass majority of our people taking their opportunity to mock, and there's endless amounts of them, recording, making videos on TikTok and so on and so forth, scoffing at the Lord's servants, right? So, all that mocking, is going to eventually fall back on their own heads. It's going to be recompensed, right? So, you know, ultimately, that's pretty much, the point. The Lord, uses, he can use, two birds to kill, use one stone to kill two birds, like they say in the world, right? So a lot of the situations we're in, it can be used to build you, and it can be also as a setup to destroy someone else, right? That's really the point of this lesson right here. But Lord's will, this lesson was edifying. Just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashim El Shai. Until next time, I say Shalom.